You want to know about a future character that may or may not look like another character from another game. Well, I got you. I got you. Today, boys, we're going to be talking about who you need to prep for this future purple-haired character. Okay? That may or may not be named Acheron, not Aeon. All right, enough of the goofy stuff. What's up, gamers? I'm gonna talk about what characters that you need to keep out, or yeah, I guess keep an eye on, for this future character as teammates, right? If you know, you know, but Acheron has specific requirements and wants specific things. So today I will be talking about the characters who you are going to want to use with her, and the characters that may help you actually use her, right? It's a pretty strict requirement, all things considered, and I'm just gonna go over uh, the different setups you'll want to do, or more specifically, how each character functions with her, the ones you're gonna, look for and build and towards helping her, right? So enough of the intro yapping. Let's get it started. So this character, this video is focused on the E0 version. E2, E2S1 and beyond can do more funny stuff, so I won't be talking about harmonies in this video, except for mentioning Rune May, but that's for a specific reason. Well, actually, I can mention both Sparkle and Rune May, um, and I guess Ting Yun. But anyways, point is, we're focusing on the lower E0 state as this is more common for players. All right. So the main thing with this character, as I said, if you know, you know, she wants two of her same type, right? Who's gonna work with her? Well, basically everyone of this type. However, there's a bit of a caveat, right? So we're gonna go from left to right. I had this tiered originally, although should I pull it up? Uh, you know what? I will actually do that. I'm just not gonna pull it up on screen, right? I'm gonna leave it like this. So I'm gonna do sort of worst to best and sort of like up to down the top, right? And so just keep that in mind wherever your preferred character is. So starting off with Sampo. Sampo does apply a debuff on every attack, right? He has a certain base chance to apply debuff on every attack, and you can also get a bunch of wind shear stacks, right? However, that's all he does, right? This character wants other debuffs applied, right? And again, him attacking, especially if you build him fast, and having the dot procs is really good. However, where he suffers is not having the force proc ability, right? He does give a wind shear like on the ult, right? But not having the additional utility of like a force proc, and again the fact that he does have RNG a bit to it, right? You need to build a lot of effect hit rate to get guaranteed procs, does make him suffer over other characters. So because of that, right, very simple reasons, the fact that he doesn't really have any like supporting in this kit, he's not ideal for this character, right? So Sampo just sort of is kind of the worst option. He's not helping pretty much whatsoever. So there's that. Luca. Luca does not have the same benefit as Sampo. However, he's got different things in this kit to actually make him apply that dot damage, right? He does have a higher base chance to actually apply it, as well as the fact that he himself can do pretty decent damage, being that he's physical. You can get some good break damage out of him as well, right? And the main thing with his ultimate giving a damage taken debuff, right? So this is actually a debuff that will work with this character, and so you will do more damage taken. Now, the reason why I put him down here is because just about every other Nihility character impacts her more or is just more efficient to run, right? As again, you're not getting the proc off of the ult, right? Or sorry, the basic. You're getting it off the skill and ultimate. And of course, there's the Eidolons that do help out with this kit a little bit, by him doing more damage, but that's not really helping the main character, right? The focus of this video is not really helping Acheron. And for those reasons, and the high ult cost, right? This is, again, this character, in case you don't know, wants more actions. She wants your allies to act more and apply more debuffs, right? And so because of the high ult cost, because he really isn't applying as much DOT, and the fact that he is single target, Just means he just sort of is worse, right? If his buff was stronger, maybe, or if he had more actions to go, but he doesn't really have that, so he does suffer a little bit. Yeah, so moving up on in terms of viability, I'm actually gonna rope both Kafka and Black Swan together. So the interesting thing about these characters is you can run all three of them on the team. You could do Kafka, Black Swan, Acheron, all three, and have it function, right? And potentially it is higher. However, the downside is you preferably would want to run these two on their own team with Rune May, right? You'd want to run an actual dot team, or with Gwen, right? You'd want to run an actual dot team on a separate team, because why would you put all three of these characters on one team when you could just run them separately, right? And again, it's like, yes, potentially it is Acheron's best team in terms of like overall damage, especially at whale level, and other things like that. But it's not like worth. It's not really worth it to say, right? Because why would you put all three of your characters on this one team and then not give a DPS on your other team, right? And maybe you have all these characters, right? And you can fit a DPS on your other team, but you're the basic thing here is that you're basically better off putting Kafka and Black Swan on another team, right? And again, Kafka does help her a lot in terms of applying debuffs because you have a follow up that does debuffs, and that's per basic attack. So your support does a basic, or Black Swan does a basic, you'll get Kafka follow up, and that will apply another debuff, meaning another stack for the character. So Kafka is actually one of the better picks because of that reason. More debuff application, more actions, right? Especially because you build Kafka fast anyways. Black Swan is in a similar boat. However, this is going to matter more about the let me actually pull it up about Black Swan's light cone. So you can actually run Black Swan with her solo if you use Kafka's light cone on Black Swan to apply lightning dot, and then use Black Swan E1, which gives you element penetration or element res down for that corresponding type of DOT. So you can apply lightning dot with Kafka's light cone on Black Swan and then also reduce the enemy res. So this will give Black Swan, 25 res reduction and 20 defense down. So this makes Black Swan with her E1 and Kafka's light cone a actual like replacement for some of these other characters, if not better. So yeah, you can get some tech out of that, especially because Kafka's light cone gives speed. This will allow you to do a lot of things on basically any of these characters, right? But more so specifically Black Swan because that E1 synergy. But that is something that you can do and keep in mind. And I will talk about light cones later. But yeah, that's what you would do with those two characters. I don't think there's much more I can really say about that. It's just potentially really good, but you're kind of better off on separate teams. So next here is Welt. Now Welt originally I did say was not as good. However, Welt with a break build and huge delay on the enemy, if you do actually play onto it, can allow you to run a team of Acheron, your other Nihility, Welt, and then Rune May. So like a no sustain team, but you have pseudo sustain from having Rune May and Welt delay the enemy as much as possible, right? So that is actually really strong and powerful and allows you to run it. However, Welt's buffs aren't that strong. He only gets a 12% damage increase to the enemy for 2 turns on his ultimate. So the goal here is to sacrifice Welt's damage by giving him the light cone that gives you energy recharge for defense down, and then run someone like Pella in the other slot. So you can get Welt's ult up as much as possible, delay as much as possible via his ultimate, via putting a break rope on him, right? And stuff like that. You could do ER rope, I guess, but yeah, you want to get as many break stats. You want to delay as much as possible, spam his ult as much as possible for the uptime and all that. So there is some setup with Welt that you can do to make him good, which is why he's here. By himself, he isn't doing all that much, all honesty, and in fact, he does impact. Like he does have anti synergy with a couple of setups, uh, by himself, right? So you can do the pseudo sustain and be just fine. But if you try to run Welt without that pseudo sustain, he does negatively impact a couple of the setups, which is why originally I had him lower. And now, what are the setups? Well, specifically, those setups are with specific light cones. So the Eternal Universal Market light cone. This requires enemies to get hit. So if you try to use a preservation character on the team or like the Flame MC for aggro to force proc this, I'll get into that later. Welt will delay the enemy so they can't get actions. Therefore, you can't apply debuffs with the other characters. right? And this goes more so for the other Nihility light cones, like the Luca light cone, the Silver Wolf light cone, and the Kafka light cone, right? The Luca light cone has this restriction to where if they're already ensnared, you can't reapply the debuff, right? So if you apply that, but then delay them so they can't act, you can't remove it, therefore removing an application of this debuff from another character like Pella, right? So because of that, and it goes the same thing here, right? If they're not already inflicted by it, you can apply it. So it's the same thing for all these light cones, to where you will negatively impact the synergy with these like 4 light cones if you run Welt like by himself. So there is a bit of anti-synergy there. You got to keep that in mind. It's not too big of a deal, right? You can still use him, but he's not as like strong as some of these other options. And same thing goes for Silverwolf's light cone, although hers is a bit easier because it's not like it can apply to a different target, but that's still gonna come into an effect where Welt's delay and slow can mean you can actually miss some of the light cone procs for debuffs, right? So keep that in mind. Welt is like okay to run, but I think you're better off running other options, right? So yeah, I know I'm kind of yapping there about those characters, but it's not a big deal. Gwen, who's arguably one of the better picks, she is still in this like second tier of characters, and the main draw for her here is the fact that well she has a force proc slash debuff on her ultimate, right? So this works in tandem with this light cone, right? And the reason why I mentioned that is because it's 2 separate instances of burn. She can force trigger that with her ultimate, her own burn plus that light cone burn, and then it will stack her passive Fire Kiss. And this is the strength of this unit, the Fire Kiss stacks, right? At E6, you can get like 31% damage increase or damage taken, and that is a really strong multiplier for the team overall, right? And because again, if you do run the setup with this light cone on your preservation character, you can stack this really fast, right? You can do it in 2 triggers. So really, really strong in terms of like a buff that damage taken. Gwen can also do damage herself. And so she's really good for this character specifically. Obviously, other characters are better. Like we'll about to talk about those too. But Gwen does provide a lot, given the fact that she can do decent damage herself. Uh, I mean, like with this setup, she won't do too much damage, obviously, but she'll do some damage. And then you also get the massive debuff for Acheron to do a lot of damage. So Gwen is really good for this setup, right? And it's sort of the same thing how you would build all these characters is because you want them to act as much as possible. You would sacrifice their own personal damage for like energy recharge with the tutorial light cone. And if you don't have the tutorial light cone, you are out of luck. I'll just tell you that right now. Without the tutorial light cone, because of how lackluster Nihility options are for Acheron, you will suffer with your team building, right? Now you can sort of get around this if you have spent money by getting like Silver Wolf and other light cones. So you can keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. There is a few ways around it, but again, this light cone is huge for Nihility characters. If you don't have it, it sucks. I wish newer players had a way to get this, but some of you will just be out of luck for this character's builds, and so she will suffer for not having the proper light cones on your teammates. So the 2 best characters is going to for Acheron is going to be Pella and Silverwolf, right? Pella and Silverwolf, the reason why they are good is multiple things. Pella has a really cheap ult cost with multiple sources of energy on her kit. You build her energy recharge, she gets her ultimate up incredibly fast. You can do 2-turn ults, or you can just do the regular 3-turn. But it's really consistent, really fast. She has a guaranteed, or she can get a debuff on her E4, which it doesn't help her, but that is another way to apply debuff without using a light cone. Now, with the Pella setup, you would ideally use the Luca light cone to apply on your normal to keep Pella's skill point positive, right? But the main thing with Pella is her massive defense shred on ultimate. 42% defense shred on ult is huge, and the fact that you can actually start the fight with a 20% defense shred via her technique. So you can get a lot of defense shred from Pella, upwards of like 78% defense shred, like turn 1 of Pella. So you can get some really powerful effects. And the fact that Pella can do a bit of damage herself. Now, Pella's damage is irrelevant for this, right? But Pella provides so much with her kit It's crazy. She's basically Acheron's best friend. And another important thing is her trace buffing effect hit rate. Pella buffing effect hit rate is good for every other nihility because every other character I mentioned needs effect hit rate to apply their debuffs, right? Pella has a bunch of effect hit rate built into her kit, right? She's got the traces and the +10 for all allies. So she is huge for everybody who wants to apply debuffs, right? Running her helps out the team immensely, right? Very, very powerful character for this setup, and definitely one that you should build if you don't already have her built, right? Um, Pella's incredibly flexible and good, worth investing into that character. Next up is Silverwolf. Again, Pella and Silverwolf are the best friends of Acheron. Silverwolf is kind of like Pella, except single target focus. So Silverwolf can apply stronger debuffs overall by getting upwards of like 53% defense, and if you stack the light cone, it goes up to 68 or something, or 69, the defense shred. So you can get similar levels of defense shred up at all the time because her debuffs actually last longer, being 3 turns. So you can actually get a lot out of Silverwolf. You have different options of running her with different light cones. Again, Silverwolf can run pretty much any of these. You can do tutorial with E1 Silverwolf to get 1 turn ultimates and have more actions for your Acheron. So that can be very, very powerful to run on Silverwolf. And again, another reason why if you don't have this light cone, you're just kind of out of luck. The ult's cooldown, right? So again, Silverwolf has a bunch of powerful abilities for Acheron, like applying the element weakness and applying massive defense shred. So you get a lot from running this character with her. There's also the element res down that is huge for overall damage. That's great. And then the other thing that's important is her E2. So if you actually have E2 Silverwolf, she's like the best person to run because it reduces the effect res of the enemy, which means it is now way easier for everybody else to apply their debuffs, right? So this is very powerful if you have it, and this is why I mentioned if you spent money, you can sort of get around some of the restrictions, right? Let alone Acheron's own Eidolons. Other characters' Eidolons help out immensely for her kit. So yeah, Silverwolf just has so many reasons and so many debuffs to apply. You just build her a lot of speed, and she's like the best person to run there, especially given that it is single target focused. So yeah, Silverwolf, great character to use. So before I get into the defensive characters to use, which is sort of the debated topic right now, I'm going to talk about Harmony characters being Sparkle and Runmei. So I already mentioned Runmei with the pseudo sustain setup with Welt, right? So again, it can work if you do want to run it like that. It can be pretty good, but you typically wouldn't run a Harmony character without E2 Acheron. So keep that in mind. And then Sparkle does is more comfortable than like Bronya to use, obviously, because you don't have to do any funny, speed tuning or like turn advancement, and Sparkle can just get you a lot of damage, right? The downside is you're not running another debuffer or the same type ally, so you're losing a shit ton of damage for your passive. And so you can run her, but you do get at a loss of getting your ultimate up, right? So Sparkle isn't worth running really until you get E2. You can do it, but again, it will be a slower overall rotation, right? You got to keep that in mind. But yeah, that's basically all I really wanted to say. Really good damage, but it does impact the rest of the team. And then characters like Ting Yun, energy doesn't work on her. Keep that in mind. You can use this character, but it's like a net zero because the energy does not do anything. So you're just getting the damage percent attack. And so you're kind of better off running really anybody else, right? Still very powerful, same type ally. You can get like 60+% damage percent, but not worth running whatsoever, because half of the character literally doesn't function. So keep that in mind. All right. Now then, I've already been yapping too much, but luckily there's not too many sustained characters to talk about. So, firstly, we're going to talk about March 7th. March 7th does have a freeze in her ultimate if you build her right. You can get a guaranteed freeze proc. I wouldn't use her for, well, the fact that AoE fights kind of screw her over because you'll just take chip damage and completely die. And then the fact that she's pretty skill point efficient at that, inefficient at that, because you don't really like you're gonna have to spam the skill to keep the shield up and target her, and it's not like it's not a taunt, right? It's just an increased chance to be targeted. So again, March just isn't worth running. She's kind of bad with her. So she's like the worst one. Next up are going to be Japard and Fwan. So Japard does have a debuff, but he also has the same issue as being skill point inefficient, and his base chance to apply it is really low. 65% base chance is incredibly low, and you're not gonna get this to be consistent at all. And so for that reason, despite the fact that shield's being pretty decent, he will not be good with her, unfortunately. There are Eidolons that change this, like his E4, but who's gonna have E4 Japard, right? Um, yeah, unfortunately, Japard is not very strong with her, so just is what it is. Fwan. Fwan does not have a debuff, so you got to keep that in mind. Fwan is incredibly powerful though, giving you free crit via her actual trace, right? As we all know. So it can be very helpful for you for getting higher crit, but again, no debuff, so you got to keep that in mind, as it will be harder to get your ultimate in that regard. Okay. And then next up is we have, so there's actually two characters coming out, Aventurine and Gallagher. I'm going to mention those characters. You know why? Gallagher could be free in the future because he's a new 4-star. The other 4-stars have been free, right? It's also going to be the anniversary. So you could get a copy of him for free, or if you're summoning on one of these banners, you'll probably get him. Use him. He's good. He will work well with her. He does have one downside. I won't talk about that though, because Hoyo ninjas. But yeah, or Hoyo spies. And then Adventurine, also good. However, he is the best if you spend money. If you get E2S1, he is the best for her. So just keep that in mind. So yeah, those are good. And then lastly, for the defensive or preservation characters, is the Fire MC. So depending on the matchup and depending on if you invest very heavily in the MC, this is a very expensive setup to run. But if you do actually do it, the MC is arguably her best. So in order for me to explain this, right, I'm actually gonna open up MS Paint. Right. So I have my MC here in game. Actually, I'm working on this specific setup right here. But you need to run that light cone I've been talking about this whole time, trying to universal market. You need to max out your defensive abilities as much as possible to get rid of chip damage. And then you need to run a huge defense setup with like really high percent gear, right? So you need like perfectly rolled defensive gear and still having a decent amount of effect hit rate. So you need to get a lot of defense effect res and effect hit rate. And you need to hit the minimum speed to outspeed the main DPS, right? Or you could theoretically run the MC slow and build more defense, but this will impact your actual like defensive ability to some extent, right? I don't know. Is it one turn? Yeah. So this is a one turn taunt, right? And because it's one turn, that's why you really don't want to have the MC be slow, because if the enemy acts multiple times before the MC, then you will die from some enemy targeting the wrong character, right? That's why you want the MC to be fast. So all of this combined is an incredibly high like investment that you need to put, and like my stuff isn't even perfect yet. I'm trying to get it better. But the MC you need to invest into a lot to get this setup to work, but it is worth it. And I'll explain why. So the light cone, right, works from you getting hits. Makes sense, right? The MC has a taunt that forces the enemies to target the MC, right? And so with enough effect hit rate or lowering the enemy's effect res, you can therefore guarantee the taunt, right? So this base chance will be just guaranteed taunt. You know why that's good? Because that will again guarantee you forcing the enemy to attack only the MC. Now in AoE scenarios, this does change, but that's why you want to max out your defense as much as possible, right? So you can completely remove chip damage and only have your MC, who's going to be sitting there with like 60% damage reduction, tanking every hit, and the MC getting hit because it's a guaranteed hit, because again they're going to attack the MC because it's a taunt, will proc the light cone, giving you a debuff application on every single hit, which means every single hit from getting hit will be a stack for Acheron, right? Do you see why this is do you understand why the MC is potentially the best for her? Is because you can force apply a taunt, which is one stack, right? And then you have upwards of like 6+ stacks to gain from you forcing yourself to get hit for this light cone, right? And so to sort of visualize it, right? You have your 4 team members, right? The MC does the taunt thing, right? So yeah, the shield does the taunt against five five bozos, right? Right. And then these 5 bozos are going to all launch their attacks at MC over that turn, right? Because it's a taunt. And then because of that, you're going to then get stacks for each attack, meaning I'm having a brain moment here, meaning the MC can solo gain her ult basically, because this is going to be 6 total stacks if this happens, not including additional attacks, because some enemies can attack multiple times, right? Or turn advanced enemies. So you theoretically could get the entire ultimate just by using one skill on the MC. So do you see now why the MC is up here near the top for the best sustains? The MC does have the issue though. No cleanse, again, could die or chip damage and speed. So it's a very high investment thing, and it's matchup dependent. It's gonna depend on your lineup of enemies, right? Because you're gonna want to not have any enemies that CC unless you get really lucky with effect res procs or have like 50% effect res like my build has. So I've been doing pretty well in that regard. Um, so yeah, keep that in mind. MC can go crazy, and it's really really good to actually like use this character. Like it's actually a viable setup. Just it's matchup dependent and requires heavy investment. But you can get a lot out of it. And who knows, in the future they'll give us other defensive characters for this. So yeah, that's about it. And then lastly, going up again, Ho Ho. Energy doesn't work. Can't really use her. Locha is just good for SP. Otherwise, no one's really doing anything for her. So yeah, that's basically it. Oh, well, actually, the light cones. These 4 light cones. Wait, my bad. Wrong one. These 4 light cones have a debuff, right? So you will want to consider using these 4 light cones on your other characters to actually get more debuff application and be skill point efficient, because you only have to use basic, right? This won't really apply to the characters that have a debuff on their basic, like Gwen or Black Swan, right? They can apply their DOT, but it can help build setup for either hyperspeed setups for like Kafka's Light Cone, or just give you more damage from applying another debuff, right? So you'll want to keep that in mind. These light cones are all light cones to look out for or level up if you don't have them. Same goes for this light cone. If you don't have this, as I said earlier, I'm sorry, but this is going to be like the best one for it, because Acheron cares about her allies getting as many actions as possible. So you don't want to keep that in mind. Other than that, that's about it. I don't have much more to say. I think I've yapped long enough. I think I've explained everything pretty well to you in terms of teammates, who to use. Hopefully this helps people in terms of prepping for the character. That's what this video is meant for. I'm excited. If you're watching this, I'm sure you're excited there. If you made it to the end, maybe like, subscribe so you can see more content from me, of me just being a nerd, right? And that's about it. Yeah, so start preparing for her. Shout out to your account, by the way. Good Night Sleep Well is her only 4-star, her only good 4-star. Everything else is inferior, unless you're like have this S5, then you can cope. But I highly recommend trying to get her light cone. Just keep that out there. So yeah, see you guys for the next one, and tell me what you think down below. Yeah.